My son was removed from honors for theft accusations. The counselor froze. District attorney? The call came at 2:18 p.m. on a Wednesday, while I was in the middle of presenting evidence to a grand jury in the Westfield corruption case. My son Dylan's name flashed across my phone screen, and I almost sent it to voicemail because he knew I was in session. But 16 years of being a father had trained my instincts to recognize when something was genuinely wrong, so I excused myself from the jury room and answered, "Dad, you need to get to school immediately." His voice was tight, controlled in that way that meant he was fighting to keep his composure in front of people who were watching. Mrs. Pemberton just pulled me out of class and told me I'm being removed from all honors courses effective immediately. She says I stole money from the student council fundraiser, and they have witnesses who saw me do it. They're calling the police, Dad. They're saying it's criminal theft, and my entire academic record is going to show I'm a thief. I was already moving, already grabbing my briefcase and badge from the evidence table. The grand jury could wait. My son couldn't. Dylan, listen to me carefully. Do not say anything to anyone without me present. Do not sign any documents. Do not answer any questions. Do not let them pressure you into admitting something you didn't do. I know you didn't steal anything, and we're going to prove it. I'm 12 minutes away. His voice cracked slightly. They already called Mom. She's on her way too, but she doesn't know what to do. They're treating me like a criminal. Tell Mrs. Pemberton that your father is the district attorney for this county, and he'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't say another word until I arrive. I hung up and looked at my assistant district attorney, Rebecca Lawson, who'd been waiting outside the jury room. Family emergency. My son's school is accusing him of theft. I need you to finish the grand jury presentation. Rebecca nodded immediately, understanding in her eyes. Go. We'll handle it. I'll call you if anything urgent comes up. I grabbed my trial bag, the one I kept stocked with recording devices, legal pads, and the credential case that identified me as District Attorney James Holloway, elected to serve the people of Westfield County for the past 11 years. Before that, I'd spent 8 years as a prosecutor in the State Attorney General's office, handling major financial crimes, public corruption, and organized theft rings. I'd built my career on understanding how theft actually worked, how to trace stolen property, how to build evidentiary chains, and how to recognize when someone was being framed. I knew the difference between real criminal behavior and manufactured accusations, and every professional instinct I'd developed over 19 years was telling me this was wrong. Dylan was 16, a sophomore at Riverside High School, one of the top-performing public schools in the state. He'd been in the honors track since freshman year, maintaining a 3.9 GPA while playing varsity basketball and serving as treasurer of the student council. He was responsible for managing the student council's fundraising accounts, keeping detailed records of every dollar raised and spent, and presenting financial reports at monthly meetings. He'd never been in trouble, never had a disciplinary issue, never given me or his mother any reason to question his integrity. The idea that he'd steal from the very organization he served was absurd. But as I drove toward Riverside High School, my hands gripping the steering wheel hard enough to hurt, something was nagging at me. Dylan had mentioned his mother, my ex-wife, Patricia. We'd divorced 3 years ago after she'd had an affair with her co-worker, and the custody arrangement had been contentious. She'd wanted primary custody and had argued that my job as district attorney made me an absent father who prioritized convictions over family. The judge had disagreed and awarded us joint custody with Dylan spending weekdays with me and weekends with Patricia. She'd been bitter about that decision, bitter about the divorce settlement, and bitter that Dylan had chosen to stay in the school district where I lived rather than transfer to the private school near her new house. I pushed the thought away. Even Patricia wouldn't stoop to manufacturing criminal accusations against her own son. This had to be something else, some misunderstanding or mistake that I could clear up once I examined the actual evidence. Riverside High School was a sprawling modern complex serving 2,400 students, with a reputation for academic excellence and a zero-tolerance policy for theft and cheating. The school had invested heavily in technology and security, with cameras throughout the building and strict protocols for handling money from fundraisers and school activities. I parked in the visitor lot at 2:31 p.m. and walked through the main entrance, showing my credentials to the security guard who recognized me from previous visits. The administrative wing was on the second floor, a suite of offices with glass walls that allowed visitors to see the counselors and administrators working inside. Through the glass, I could see Dylan sitting in a chair outside the counseling office, his shoulders hunched, his face pale. Next to him sat Patricia, dressed in expensive business casual and looking more angry than concerned. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. Dylan looked up when I approached, and the relief in his eyes was immediate. Dad. I went straight to him, putting my hand on his shoulder. Are you okay? Did they question you? He shook his head. Mrs. Pemberton said I couldn't go back to class until you got here. She's inside with the principal and the school resource officer. They said the police are on their way. Patricia stood, her expression tight. James, this is ridiculous. They're accusing Dylan of stealing $3,800 from the basketball tournament fundraiser. They claim he took cash donations and never deposited them. Dylan wouldn't do that. He's meticulous about the student council finances. I looked at her, searching for any sign of her involvement, but her anger seemed genuine. We'll get to the bottom of this. but I need both of you to let me handle it. Don't answer any questions. Don't volunteer any information. Let me do the talking." Before Patricia could respond, the door to the counseling office opened, and Mrs. Lydia Pemberton stepped out. She was in her early 50s, had been the academic counselor at Riverside for 15 years, and had a reputation for being strict but fair. She started to speak, her tone professionally sympathetic but firm. "Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, thank you for coming so quickly. I know this is difficult, but we have a serious situation involving Dylan and missing funds from the student council." Then she actually looked at me, really looked at me for the first time, and I watched her expression change. The professional sympathy dissolved into something close to panic. Her eyes went to the credential case clipped to my belt, then back to my face. "District Attorney Holloway?" she said, her voice suddenly uncertain. "I didn't realize Dylan's father was the district attorney. I've been prosecuting criminals in this county for 11 years, I said evenly. "So when you tell me my son stole money, I'm going to examine that accusation with the same scrutiny I apply to every theft case that crosses my desk. And if the evidence doesn't support it, I'm going to want to know exactly who made this accusation and why." Mrs. Pemberton's face flushed. "Mr. Holloway, we're not trying to railroad your son. We're following district policy for investigating financial discrepancies. Perhaps we should discuss this in Principal Garrett's office." She led us down the hallway to a larger office where Principal Donald Garrett was waiting. He was in his late 50s, had been principal at Riverside for 12 years, and was known for running the school with strict adherence to rules and zero tolerance for misconduct. Also present was Officer Kevin Norris, the school resource officer, a uniformed police officer in his early 40s who worked directly for the Westfield Police Department but was assigned to the school. And sitting in one of the visitor chairs was someone I recognized immediately, though it took me a moment to place why. Councilman Robert Thatcher, a member of the city council who'd been involved in several contentious budget disputes with my office over prosecution funding. His son, Justin Thatcher, was also a sophomore at Riverside and served as vice president of the student council. Principal Garrett began speaking, his tone carefully neutral. "Mr. Holloway, Mrs. Holloway, thank you for coming. We've discovered a significant discrepancy in the student council's financial records. Approximately $3,800 in cash donations from the recent basketball tournament fundraiser appears to be missing. Dylan, as treasurer, was responsible for collecting and depositing those funds. We have witness statements indicating he received the cash, but never deposited it into the student council account." I pulled out a legal pad and pen. "Who are these witnesses, and what specifically did they claim to observe?" Mrs. Pemberton opened a file folder. "We have 3 student witnesses. Justin Thatcher, the vice president, reported that he personally handed Dylan $1,500 in cash from the concession stand sales on Saturday night. Melissa Granger, a junior volunteer, stated she gave Dylan $900 in cash from the raffle ticket sales. And Kevin Yang, another sophomore, said he gave Dylan $1,400 from the entrance fee collections. All 3 confirmed they gave Dylan the money in cash and watched him put it in the lockbox he was using to secure the funds." "And did anyone actually witness Dylan removing money from that lockbox or failing to deposit it?" I asked. Officer Norris spoke up. "The deposits were supposed to be made at First National Bank on Monday morning. Dylan was scheduled to make the deposit during his study hall period, which starts at 10:15 a.m. Bank records show no deposit was made. The money is missing, and Dylan was the last person with access to the lockbox." "Where is the lockbox now?" I asked. "It's in the student council office," Mrs. Pemberton said. "It was returned to the office on Monday afternoon. Empty except for some receipts. We've secured it as evidence. I want to see it. I also want to see the bank records, the witness statements, and any security footage from the fundraiser and from Monday morning when the deposit was supposed to occur." Principal Garrett shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Holloway, I understand you want to defend your son, but this is a school disciplinary matter, not a criminal investigation. We have protocols to follow. This is absolutely a criminal investigation," I said. "You've accused a minor of theft exceeding $3,000, which is a felony in this state. You've involved the school resource officer, which means you've already made this a law enforcement matter, and you've stated your intention to remove my son from honors courses and mark his academic record with a theft accusation, which will affect his college applications and his future. So yes, I'm going to investigate this like any other felony theft allegation, and I'm going to demand the same evidentiary standards I'd require in any prosecution." Councilman Thatcher leaned forward. "Mr. Holloway, I respect your position, but my son and the other witnesses have been very clear about what happened. They gave Dylan the money, he was responsible for it, and it's gone. We're not making accusations lightly. We're trying to protect the integrity of the student council and ensure school funds are properly handled." I turned my attention to him. "Councilman Thatcher, does your son have any reason to be hostile toward Dylan? Any conflicts or competition that might motivate a false accusation?" Thatcher's expression hardened. "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Holloway. My son has no reason to lie. He's an honor student with an impeccable record. So is my son," I said, "which is why I find it hard to believe he'd suddenly steal $3,800 when he's been managing student council finances flawlessly for 18 months. Let me ask a different question. Who would benefit from Dylan being removed from his position as treasurer?" There was a long, uncomfortable silence. Mrs. Pemberton finally spoke. If Dillon is removed, the vice president would assume the treasurer duties until a new election could be held. That would be Justin Thatcher. I looked at Councilman Thatcher. How convenient. Your son reports my son to be holding money. My son gets removed from his position, and your son takes over the financial responsibilities. That's not an accusation, Councilman. That's just an observation about who benefits. Thatcher stood abruptly. I don't appreciate the insinuation. My son came forward because he was concerned about missing funds. He did the right thing by reporting it. Officer Norris intervened. Mr. Holloway, I think we need to step back. I've been asked to investigate this as a potential theft. I'm required to interview Dillon as part of that investigation. If you'd like to be present, that's fine, but we need to move forward with the process. Not yet, I said. Before any interviews happen, I want to examine the evidence. I want to see the lockbox, I want to see the bank records, and I want to review the security footage from the fundraiser. If there's actual evidence of theft, we'll address it. But I'm not letting you interrogate my son based solely on uncorroborated witness statements from students who have a motive to lie. Principal Garrett exchanged glances with Mrs. Pemberton. The security footage is available. We can review it in the security office, and the lockbox is in the student council room, which we can access. But the bank records are private financial documents that require a subpoena. I'm the district attorney, I said. I can have a subpoena for First National Bank issued within the hour, but I'd prefer to handle this cooperatively. If the bank will voluntarily provide records showing deposits into the student council account, we can resolve this faster. Officer Norris nodded. I can request the records as part of the police investigation. The bank usually cooperates with law enforcement requests. Let's start with the security footage, I said. Show me what actually happened at the fundraiser. We moved to the security office, a small room filled with monitors showing live feeds from cameras throughout the school. The security director, a retired police officer named Bill Crawford, pulled up footage from the previous Saturday night when the basketball tournament fundraiser had taken place. The gym was packed with students, parents, and community members. Multiple cameras showed the concession stands, raffle table, and entrance area where admission fees were being collected. Crawford fast-forwarded to the relevant times, and we watched as Dillon moved between the different stations, collecting money from the volunteers and placing it into a gray metal lockbox he carried with him. The footage showed Justin Thatcher at the concession stand, handling cash and speaking with Dillon. I could see money changing hands, though the camera angle didn't allow me to count it or verify the amount. The timestamp showed 8:32 p.m. on Saturday night. Next, the footage showed Melissa Granger at the raffle table, also handing money to Dillon. The timestamp was 8:51 p.m. Finally, Kevin Yang at the entrance, giving Dillon what appeared to be a stack of bills. The timestamp was 9:15 p.m. In each case, Dillon took the money, placed it in the lockbox, and locked it with a small key he wore on a lanyard around his neck. That confirms Dillon received money, I said, but it doesn't show how much, and it doesn't show what happened to it afterward. Is there footage from Monday morning when he was supposed to make the deposit? Crawford pulled up footage from Monday. At 10:18 a.m., Dillon appeared on camera leaving the school building through the main entrance, carrying the lockbox. He walked across the parking lot toward the street, then disappeared from camera range. At 11:02 a.m., he returned, no longer carrying the lockbox. He went directly to the student council office, stayed for approximately 3 minutes, then left for his next class. Where's the bank in relation to the school? I asked. First National is 4 blocks east, Officer Norris said. A 10-minute walk each way, so the timeline fits. Dillon left with the lockbox, had enough time to walk to the bank and back, and returned within the expected time frame. So where's the deposit? Mrs. Pemberton said quietly. The bank has no record of it. I turned to Dillon, who'd been silent through this entire review. Tell me exactly what happened Monday morning. Walk me through every detail. Dillon took a deep breath, his voice steady despite his obvious stress. I left study hall at 10:15 with the lockbox like I always do when I make deposits. I walked to First National Bank, went inside, and filled out the deposit slip for the student council account. The total was $3,800 in cash, all the money from the fundraiser. I gave the deposit slip and the cash to the teller, a woman named Mrs. Garrison, who I've worked with before. She counted the money, gave me a receipt, and I left. When I got back to school, I put the receipt and the empty lockbox in the student council office and went to my next class. Everything was normal. Do you still have the receipt? I asked. I put it in the filing cabinet in the student council office, Dillon said. I always file the deposit receipts in chronological order. It should be in the folder labeled March Deposits. Principal Garrett spoke up. We checked the filing cabinet this morning when the discrepancy was discovered. There was no deposit receipt for Monday. The folder was empty. Dillon's face went pale. That's impossible. I filed it right after I got back. I always file them immediately. Someone must have removed it. Or you never had a receipt because you never made the deposit, Councilman Thatcher said. You took the money, made up this story about the bank, and now you're trying to cover it up. I held up my hand. Nobody's covering anything up. This is basic investigative work. If Dillon says he made the deposit and received a receipt, then we verify it with the bank. Officer Norris, you need to contact First National immediately and request transaction records for the student council account for Monday morning. We'll also need to interview the teller, Mrs. Garrison, to confirm whether she remembers the transaction. Norris nodded and pulled out his phone, stepping into the hallway to make the call. While we waited, I turned to Crawford. Do you have security footage from the student council office? Specifically, footage showing who accessed the office on Monday afternoon or this morning before the missing receipt was discovered? Crawford checked his system. The student council office doesn't have interior cameras, but we have a hallway camera that shows the door. I can pull footage showing everyone who entered or exited. Do it, I said. I want to see everyone who went into that office between Monday afternoon when Dylan filed the receipt and this morning when it went missing. We returned to Principal Garrett's office to wait for Officer Norris's call. The tension in the room was thick. Patricia looked anxious. Dylan looked scared, and Councilman Thatcher looked increasingly uncomfortable. 20 minutes later, Norris returned, his expression grim. I spoke with the branch manager at First National. They have no record of any deposit to the student council account on Monday morning. No transaction, no receipt, no record that Dylan was even in the bank that day. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. Did they check their security footage to verify whether Dylan entered the bank? The branch manager is pulling the footage now. He'll call me back within the hour. Until then, I need to formally interview Dylan about the missing funds. Dylan's voice cracked. Dad, I swear I made the deposit. I gave the money to Mrs. Garrison. She counted it. She gave me a receipt. I don't understand what's happening. I believe you, I said, but we need to figure out why the bank has no record of a transaction you say happened. Officer Norris, I'm invoking my right as Dylan's parent to be present during any interview, and I'm also advising him to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination until we have more information. You can't seriously be telling your son to refuse to cooperate with an investigation, Councilman Thatcher said. I'm telling my son to exercise his constitutional rights until we understand what's actually happening here, I said. Something doesn't add up. Dylan has been treasurer for 18 months without any problems. He's made dozens of deposits without issues. Why would he suddenly steal money now? And why would he make up an elaborate story about making a deposit that can be easily disproved by checking with the bank? If he'd actually stolen the money, he'd have come up with a better cover story. Mrs. Pemberton spoke carefully. Mr. Holloway, I understand you want to defend your son, but the evidence is pointing in a concerning direction. Perhaps Dylan made an impulsive decision and is now trying to cover it up. Teenagers make mistakes. If he admits what happened and works to make restitution, we might be able to handle this as a disciplinary matter rather than a criminal one. You want him to confess to something he didn't do, I said flatly. That's not happening. We're going to wait for the bank footage, we're going to review the student council office security recordings, and we're going to follow the actual evidence, not assumptions. Principal Garrett stood up. Given the seriousness of this situation, I'm suspending Dylan from all student council activities pending the investigation. He's also being removed from honors courses until this is resolved. A theft accusation of this magnitude requires us to take immediate action to protect the integrity of our academic programs. You're punishing him before the investigation is complete, I said. You're removing him from honors based on unproven allegations. That violates the student handbook procedures for disciplinary action. We have the discretion to act when student conduct is in question, Garrett said. This is my decision as principal, and it stands. I pulled out my phone and sent a quick text to Rebecca Lawson at my office. Need education law attorney recommendation ASAP. Son being removed from honors based on theft accusations. No due process. Then I looked at Principal Garrett. You're making a mistake, but if you're determined to do this, I want it documented in writing. I want the specific allegations, the evidence you're relying on, and the names of all witnesses. I also want a copy of the student handbook provisions you're claiming give you the authority to remove a student from honors without a hearing or opportunity to respond. And I'm putting you on notice that if this turns out to be a false accusation, if someone has framed my son, I will pursue criminal charges against everyone involved. That's not a threat. That's a promise. The room went silent. Mrs. Pemberton looked uncomfortable. Councilman Thatcher's expression hardened. Officer Norris's phone rang, breaking the tension. He answered, listened for a moment, then looked at me. That was the bank manager. They've reviewed Monday morning's security footage. Dylan never entered the bank. There's no record of him being there at all. I felt the floor drop out from under me. Dylan's face went white. That's impossible. I was there. I talked to Mrs. Garrison. I made the deposit. I have to see that footage myself, I said. There's a mistake somewhere. Officer Norris, I want to go to the bank right now and review that footage personally. Norris hesitated. Mr. Holloway, I don't think that's appropriate given that you're personally involved in this case. This needs to be handled by an independent investigator. Then get a detective from the police department who isn't connected to the school, I said. Get someone from financial crimes who knows how to investigate theft properly. Because something is very wrong here, and I'm not letting this go forward based on incomplete information. I'm going to step outside and make some calls. Dylan, don't answer any questions. Patricia, stay with him. I walked out into the hallway and called my office. Rebecca answered immediately. What's happening? They're claiming Dylan stole $3,800 from the student council, but the bank has no record of the deposit he says he made. The school is removing him from honors, and the police are treating him like a suspect. I need someone who can look at this objectively because I'm too close to it. I'll call Detective Raymond Phillips, Rebecca said. He's with financial crimes. He's worked with our office on embezzlement cases, and he's thorough. There's something wrong with the bank's records, or if someone's setting Dylan up, Ray will find it. Call him now. I also need that education law attorney. I'm texting you 3 names right now. The best one is Amanda Castellano. She's represented students in similar situations, and she's aggressive when schools violate due process. I'll call her. Thanks, Rebecca. I hung up and stood in the hallway for a moment, trying to process everything. My son had never lied to me. In 16 years, he'd been honest even when the truth got him in trouble. If he said he made the deposit, then he made the deposit, which meant someone had tampered with the bank's records, or the bank had made an error, or something else was happening that I didn't understand yet. 10 minutes later, Detective Raymond Phillips called me. Ray was in his early 50s, had been with financial crimes for 20 years, and had a reputation for being meticulous and fair. I'd worked with him on several prosecutions, and I trusted his judgment. James, Rebecca briefed me, I'm heading to Riverside High now, and I've already contacted First National to secure their records and security footage. I'm also going to interview the bank employees independently. If there's a discrepancy, I'll find it. But I need you to step back and let me handle this. I know that's hard when it's your son, but you can't be the investigator on this case. I understand. But Ray, something's wrong here. Dylan's never been in trouble. He's been managing these accounts for 18 months without issues. Why would he suddenly steal money and then make up a story that's so easily disproved? I don't know yet, Ray said, but I'll follow the evidence wherever it leads. Trust me to do this right. I do trust you. That's why I called. Just promise me you'll look at everything, not just the obvious narrative. I've seen too many cases where the apparent evidence pointed to the wrong person because someone manipulated the situation. I've been doing this long enough to know that the obvious answer isn't always the right one, Ray said. Let me work. I returned to Principal Garrett's office, where the atmosphere had grown even more tense. Dylan was sitting with his head in his hands, Patricia looked furious, and Councilman Thatcher was speaking quietly with Principal Garrett in the corner. Detective Raymond Phillips is on his way, I announced. He's with the Financial Crimes Unit, and he'll be conducting an independent investigation. Until he completes that investigation, I'm formally objecting to any disciplinary action against Dylan. Principal Garrett turned to me. Mr. Holloway, the disciplinary action has already been implemented. Dylan is suspended from student council and removed from honors courses as of this moment. If the investigation clears him, we'll restore his standing. But we can't wait for a lengthy criminal investigation to make decisions about student placement. You're violating your own handbook procedures, I said. Section 8.3 requires that students accused of serious misconduct be given written notice of the charges, an opportunity to present their defense, and a hearing before any disciplinary action is imposed. You've done none of that. You've acted solely on witness statements without giving Dylan any chance to respond. That makes this action arbitrary and capricious, which gives us grounds for legal challenge. Mrs. Pemberton spoke up. Mr. Holloway, we're trying to handle this internally as an educational matter. If you escalate this to litigation, it becomes much more complicated for everyone, including Dylan. If you violate Dylan's rights and destroy his academic record based on false accusations, it's already complicated, I said. I've contacted an education law attorney, and we'll be pursuing every available remedy to protect Dylan's interests. I turned to Patricia. We need to take Dylan home. He's not answering any more questions today, and I want to review all of this with an attorney before we proceed. Patricia nodded. Let's go. As we left the school, I saw Justin Thatcher in the hallway, watching us with an expression that looked almost satisfied. The look made my skin crawl. That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing everything I knew about the case. Dylan was adamant he'd made the deposit. The bank claimed there was no record. Security footage showed Dylan leaving school with the lockbox and returning without it, which supported his story about going to the bank. But the bank's security footage allegedly showed he never entered. Someone was lying, or someone had manipulated evidence. I called Amanda Castellano, the education law attorney Rebecca had recommended. Amanda was in her early 40s, had practiced education law for 15 years, and had a track record of winning cases against school districts that violated student rights. I explained the situation in detail. This is outrageous, Amanda said after I finished. They removed him from honors without any due process, without even giving him a chance to defend himself. That's a clear violation of the student handbook, which creates a contractual obligation they're required to follow. We can file an emergency injunction tomorrow to prevent them from marking his record or reporting this to colleges. But James, I have to ask, do you believe Dylan? Absolutely. He's never lied to me, and his story makes sense. If he'd actually stolen the money, he wouldn't have made up such an easily disprovable cover story. Someone's either made a mistake or deliberately set him up. Then we need to find out who and why. I'll start working on the legal filings tonight, but you need to let Detective Phillips handle the criminal investigation. You're too close to this, and anything you do could be seen as interference or bias. I know, I'm trying to step back, but every instinct I have is screaming that this is a setup. The timing, the witnesses, the missing receipt, all of it feels coordinated. Thursday morning, Detective Phillips called me at 7:30 a.m. James, I've reviewed the bank's security footage from Monday morning. Dylan definitely didn't enter the bank during the time frame he claimed. I've gone through every minute from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., and he's not on any camera. My chest tightened. That doesn't make sense. He left school with the lockbox and returned without it. If he didn't go to the bank, where did he go? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm interviewing the bank employees today to see if anyone remembers him coming in at a different time, maybe earlier or later than he claimed. I'm also checking to see if there's any possibility of a recording error or gap in the footage. I spent Thursday morning in court, prosecuting a fraud case while my mind kept drifting to Dylan's situation. During a recess, Rebecca pulled me aside. Amanda Castellano filed the emergency motion this morning. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. She's asking the court to order the school to reinstate Dylan to honors courses and to prohibit them from marking his record until the investigation is complete. Good. What's happening with the criminal investigation? Detective Phillips has been at the school and the bank all morning. He called me an hour ago to say he found something interesting in the student council office security footage. He wouldn't tell me what it was over the phone, but he wants to meet with you and Amanda this afternoon at 3 p.m. at the station. My pulse quickened. Something interesting could mean evidence that clears Dylan, or evidence that makes things worse. I'll be there. At 3 p.m., Amanda and I met Detective Phillips in a conference room at the police station. Ray had his laptop open, showing security footage from the hallway outside the student council office. Here's what I found, Ray said. On Monday afternoon at 2:45 p.m., about 20 minutes after Dylan returned from his supposed bank trip, this person entered the student council office. The footage showed someone in a dark hoodie and jeans, face partially obscured, slipping into the office. They emerged 3 minutes later and walked quickly down the hallway away from the camera. Who is that? I asked. Can you identify them from other cameras? The person knew where the cameras were, Ray said. They kept their face down or turned away in every shot. But look at this. He pulled up different footage, this time from early Wednesday morning, the day the theft was reported. The same person, same hoodie, entered the student council office at 6:52 a.m. before most students arrived. They stayed for 8 minutes, then left. Whoever this is, they accessed the office twice, Ray said. Once on Monday after Dylan made his supposed deposit, and once on Wednesday morning before the theft was reported. I think this person removed Dylan's deposit receipt on Monday and did something else on Wednesday morning. Maybe planted evidence or tampered with records. Can you identify them from body type or clothing? Amanda asked. I'm working on it, Ray said. But here's the interesting part. I pulled the school's access logs for the student council office. It requires a key card to enter outside of regular school hours. Only 5 people have authorized access. Dylan, Justin Thatcher, the faculty advisor, the principal, and the academic counselor. So it's one of those 5 people, I said. And we can eliminate Dylan because he's the victim. That leaves 4 suspects. Actually 3, Ray said. The faculty advisor was out of town on Monday and Wednesday, attending a conference in Chicago. I verified her travel records. So Justin Thatcher, Principal Garrett, or Mrs. Pemberton. One of them entered that office twice to tamper with evidence. I looked at Amanda. This proves someone's framing Dylan. This is evidence of a conspiracy. We need to identify who's in that hoodie, and we need to do it before tomorrow's hearing. Ray held up his hand. I'm already working on it. I've requested clothing and shoe records from the school to see if we can match what this person was wearing. I'm also going to interview all 3 suspects to see if anyone slips up or provides inconsistent statements. But James, you need to stay out of this. If you start questioning people, it could compromise the investigation. Let me do my job. I forced myself to nod. You're right. I'll stay back. But Ray, you need to move fast. Every day Dylan's out of honors is a day that damages his academic record and his college prospects. That evening, I sat with Dylan and went through everything again, looking for details we might have missed. Tell me about Justin Thatcher, I said. Have you had any conflicts with him? Any reason he'd want to hurt you? Dylan thought for a long moment. We've competed for grades since freshman year. He hates that I beat him for treasurer when we both ran for student council positions last year. He told people I only won because I was more popular, not because I was more qualified. His dad is on the city council and Justin's used to getting everything he wants. What else? There's a scholarship, Dylan said slowly. The Riverside Merit Scholarship. It's a full ride to any state university, worth about $100,000 over 4 years. It's awarded based on GPA, leadership positions, and community service. I'm currently in first place for it because of my grades and my student council role. Justin's second. If I lose my treasurer position and get removed from honors, my GPA will drop and I'll be disqualified. Justin would win by default. Money and status. The same motives that drove most crimes I prosecuted. Who decides the scholarship? A committee, Dylan said. The principal, the counselor, 2 school board members, and a representative from the Scholarship Foundation. Is Mrs. Pemberton on the committee? Yeah, she's the counselor representative. And she's close with Justin's family. I've seen her having lunch with Councilman Thatcher in town a few times. The pieces were falling into place. Justin had motive to eliminate Dylan from competition. Mrs. Pemberton had access to the student council office and the ability to tamper with records. Councilman Thatcher had the political connections to pressure the school administration, and all of them would benefit from Dylan being removed from his position. But I needed proof, not just suspicion. Friday morning, Amanda Castellano called me before the court hearing. James, Detective Phillips just contacted me. He identified the person in the hoodie from the security footage. The shoes matched a pair registered to Justin Thatcher in the school's athletic equipment database. He wears a distinctive brand that's uncommon, and they're visible in the footage. He also found something else. What? Phillips interviewed the bank employees yesterday afternoon. One of the tellers, a woman named Sharon Levitt, remembered Dylan coming in on Monday morning. She wasn't the one who helped him because she was on break, but she saw him waiting at the counter and talking to another teller. She specifically remembered because Dylan's a regular customer, and she'd planned to say hello but got called away. So Dylan was at the bank, I said. The security footage that supposedly shows he wasn't there is wrong, or it's been tampered with. Phillips is getting a warrant to examine the bank's security system right now. He thinks someone with technical access may have deleted or altered the footage to make it look like Dylan was never there. Who would have that kind of access? Bank employees, obviously, but also anyone with administrative access to the security server. The bank uses a cloud-based system that can be accessed remotely with the right credentials. If someone wanted to frame Dylan, they could potentially hack into the system and delete the relevant footage. This is bigger than a student prank, I said. This is criminal conspiracy involving evidence tampering and computer crimes. Whoever did this committed multiple felonies. The hearing is at 2 p.m., Amanda said. I'm going to present the new evidence from Detective Phillips and argue that the school's disciplinary action was based on fabricated evidence. We should be able to get Dylan reinstated immediately. The hearing was in Judge Carolyn Foster's courtroom. She was 51, had been on the bench for 9 years, and had a reputation for being protective of student rights and impatient with administrative overreach. Principal Garrett arrived with the school district's attorney, a man named Douglas Freeman, who specialized in defending schools against lawsuits. Mrs. Pemberton and Councilman Thatcher were also present, sitting in the gallery and looking increasingly nervous. Amanda presented our case methodically. She showed the security footage of the person in the hoodie entering the student council office twice, presented Detective Phillips's identification of Justin Thatcher based on the shoes, and introduced the testimony from the bank teller confirming Dylan had been at the bank on Monday morning, despite the security footage supposedly showing otherwise. Judge Foster watched the security footage carefully, her expression growing severe. This appears to show deliberate evidence tampering, she said. Miss Castellano, am I understanding correctly that someone removed the deposit receipt from the student council office and potentially altered bank security footage to make it appear Dylan never made the deposit? That's exactly what happened, Your Honor, Amanda said. This wasn't a case of a student stealing money. This was a deliberate conspiracy to frame Dylan Holloway, remove him from his student council position, and eliminate him as competition for a prestigious scholarship worth $100,000. The evidence suggests Justin Thatcher, with possible assistance from adults who had access to the bank's security system, orchestrated this scheme. The courtroom erupted. Councilman Thatcher stood up, his face red. That's slander. My son would never do something like that. Judge Foster banged her gavel. Sit down, Councilman. You're not a party to this proceeding. She looked at Douglas Freeman. Counselor, how does the school district respond to this evidence? Freeman looked shaken. Your Honor, we were not aware of this new evidence when we made our disciplinary decision. If Detective Phillips has determined that evidence was tampered with, then obviously we need to reevaluate our position. Reevaluate? Amanda said sharply. Your client removed a student from honors courses without due process based on fabricated evidence. They violated their own handbook procedures, they denied Dylan the right to defend himself, and they acted on the word of witnesses who we now know lied. This isn't a matter of reevaluation. This is a matter of immediate reinstatement and formal apology. Judge Foster nodded. I'm granting the injunction. Riverside High School is ordered to immediately reinstate Dylan Holloway to all honors courses and to expunge any record of this incident from his academic file. Furthermore, the school is prohibited from taking any adverse action against Dylan pending completion of the criminal investigation. The injunction is effective immediately. She looked at Principal Garrett. I'm troubled by what I've seen here. A school has an obligation to protect all students, not just the ones with wealthy or politically connected parents. If this investigation reveals that school officials were complicit in framing a student, there will be serious consequences. Outside the courtroom, Councilman Thatcher confronted me in the hallway. You've destroyed my son's reputation, he hissed. You're using your position as district attorney to persecute him because of your vendetta against me. I looked at him coldly. I didn't frame your son. He framed mine. And if the evidence shows he committed evidence tampering, computer crimes, and conspiracy, I will prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. That's not a vendetta. That's justice. Your office has had it out for me since I voted against your budget increase, Thatcher said. This is retaliation. This is following the evidence, I said. Something you'd understand if you cared more about truth than politics. Detective Phillips arrested Justin Thatcher on Monday morning at school. The charges were evidence tampering, computer crimes, conspiracy to commit theft by deception, and filing a false police report. The arrest was made publicly, with Phillips taking Justin out of his first period class in handcuffs in front of his classmates. The symbolism was deliberate. Justin had tried to use his position and his father's influence to destroy another student's future. He needed to see that actions have consequences. The investigation expanded rapidly. Forensic analysis of the bank's security system revealed that someone had remotely accessed the server on Monday afternoon and deleted approximately 1 hour of footage, specifically the time period when Dylan had been at the bank. The access had come from an IP address registered to Councilman Thatcher's home office. When Detective Phillips executed a search warrant on the Thatcher residence, they found Justin's laptop with detailed notes about the scheme. He'd researched how to access the bank's security system. He'd coordinated with a friend who worked part-time at the bank to get the access credentials, and he'd planned the timing of the evidence tampering to ensure Dylan would be blamed. But the most damning evidence was a text message exchange between Justin and Mrs. Lydia Pemberton. The messages showed she'd been aware of the plan and had actively helped by providing Justin with access to the student council office and by ensuring the theft investigation moved forward quickly before Dylan could mount an effective defense. Mrs. Pemberton was arrested Wednesday morning on charges of conspiracy, official misconduct, and abuse of her position as a school employee. Her professional license was suspended immediately. The criminal trial was scheduled for 6 months later, but Justin Thatcher accepted a plea agreement 3 months before trial. As a minor, he was offered a deal: plead guilty to evidence tampering and conspiracy, testify truthfully against the adult co-conspirators, and accept probation with mandatory community service and restitution. He took it. Mrs. Pemberton went to trial and was convicted on all counts. She received 2 years in prison and was permanently barred from working in education. Her testimony revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. She'd been pressured by Councilman Thatcher, who'd promised her a higher-paying position in the county school administration if she helped eliminate Dylan from the scholarship competition. She'd provided Justin with access to the student council office, coached him on how to make the false accusations, and rushed the investigation to prevent Dylan from gathering evidence to defend himself. Councilman Thatcher was charged with conspiracy, witness tampering, and abuse of his official position. His trial was a media spectacle, with reporters covering every detail of how a city official had used his influence to frame a teenager to benefit his son. The jury convicted him on all counts. He received 5 years in federal prison and was forced to resign from the city council. His political career was destroyed. The civil consequences extended beyond the criminal cases. Multiple families filed complaints with the State Board of Education about Riverside High School's failure to protect students from corrupt officials. The school board forced Principal Garrett to resign for his failure to conduct a proper investigation before taking disciplinary action against Dylan. The board implemented new procedures requiring independent investigations and due process protections before any student could be removed from honors programs or accused of serious misconduct. The Riverside Merit Scholarship was awarded to Dylan in a special ceremony the following month. He accepted it with a speech about integrity, evidence, and the importance of fighting for truth, even when powerful people try to silence you. The Scholarship Foundation also established new oversight procedures to prevent committee members from using the award for personal or political purposes. Dylan graduated from Riverside High School 2 years later as valedictorian with a perfect 4.0 GPA. He'd been accepted to Yale University with plans to major in criminal justice and eventually attend law school. His college application essay was about the false accusation, the investigation that cleared him, and how the experience had shaped his understanding of justice and institutional accountability. I attended his graduation sitting in the audience with Patricia, who'd been horrified when she learned what had happened and had supported Dylan throughout the legal proceedings. As Dylan gave his valedictorian speech, he spoke about the importance of evidence-based decision-making and the danger of accepting accusations without proof. The people who should protect us sometimes fail, Dylan said. The systems we trust can be corrupted by those who abuse their positions, but that doesn't mean we give up on justice. It means we fight harder to make sure the truth comes out, to make sure evidence matters more than influence, and to make sure no one is above accountability. My father taught me that. He taught me that being a prosecutor isn't about winning cases. It's about finding the truth and protecting the vulnerable from the powerful. That's what I want to do with my life. I felt pride so intense it was almost painful. This brilliant, principled young man who'd survived an attempt to destroy his future and had come out stronger. 3 years after the arrests, I was invited to speak at a conference on prosecutorial ethics and institutional corruption. I shared Dylan's story as an example of how corruption can occur at any level and how important it is to follow evidence rather than assumptions. After my presentation, a woman approached me. She introduced herself as Linda Castellano, no relation to Amanda, and explained she was a school board member from a neighboring district. Mr. Holloway, she said, we're dealing with a situation very similar to what happened to your son. A student on academic scholarship is being accused of misconduct by students from wealthy families, and the administration is rushing to judgment without proper investigation. I don't know how to stop it. I gave her Detective Phillips's contact information and Amanda Castellano's number. Document everything. Demand to see all evidence. Request independent investigation. And don't let the school intimidate you into accepting their narrative without proof. If there's actual misconduct, it will be provable. If it's fabricated, the evidence will show that too. She thanked me, relief evident in her expression. That conversation reminded me why Dylan's case had mattered beyond our family. It exposed a pattern of corruption that existed in schools across the country, where students with resources and connections could manipulate systems to harm those without power. It demonstrated that accountability was possible when people refused to accept injustice. 5 years after the incident, I received a letter from Dylan. He was finishing his second year at Yale, preparing to apply for summer internships at prosecutors' offices, and reflecting on everything that had happened. Dad, the letter read, I've been thinking about that day when I called you from school, terrified that my entire future was being destroyed by people I'd trusted. I remember feeling so helpless, convinced that no one would believe me against Justin Thatcher and his father's influence. But then you showed up, not just as my father, but as someone who knew how to find truth in a system designed to obscure it. You taught me that evidence beats influence every time if you were patient enough to gather it and brave enough to present it. What Justin and Mrs. Pemberton and Councilman Thatcher did to me was horrible, but it also showed me something important about justice. It's not automatic. It doesn't just happen because we want it to. Justice requires people who are willing to dig for truth, who refuse to accept easy narratives, and who demand accountability even when it's difficult or dangerous. I'm going to be a prosecutor because of what you did. I want to protect people who can't protect themselves. I want to expose corruption that hides behind respectability and authority, and I want to make sure what happened to me never happens to someone who doesn't have a father with the skills and resources to fight back. Thank you for believing me when everyone else had already decided I was guilty. Thank you for fighting when it would have been easier to accept their version. And thank you for showing me that one person with integrity and skill can challenge an entire corrupt system and win. I read that letter in my office and felt the weight of every case I'd prosecuted, every conviction I'd won, every corrupt official I'd sent to prison. But Dylan's case remained the most important, not because it was the most complex or the highest profile, but because it was personal, and because it had shaped my son into someone who would continue the fight for justice long after I retired. The case became a landmark in education law, cited in numerous decisions involving student rights and school disciplinary procedures. The convictions sent a clear message that fabricating evidence to harm students would result in criminal prosecution, regardless of the perpetrator's position or influence. The reforms implemented at Riverside became a model for other schools seeking to prevent similar corruption. But for me, the most meaningful outcome was simpler. Dylan had his future back. The scholarship he'd earned, the college admission he'd achieved, the opportunities he deserved, everything had been restored. The people who'd tried to destroy him were in prison, and the system that had enabled their corruption had been forced to change. Years later, I ran into Douglas Freeman, the attorney who'd represented the school district at the hearing. We were at a legal conference, and he approached me during a break. Mr. Holloway, he said, I wanted to tell you something. When I defended the school in your son's case, I believed my client. I thought you were an overprotective father using your position to bully the school. I didn't think the evidence of conspiracy could be real. I was wrong. What happened to Dylan was unconscionable, and what you did to expose it was exactly what a prosecutor should do. I've since changed how I advise school districts. I tell them to investigate thoroughly before taking action, to follow their own procedures, and to never assume that accusations are true just because they come from influential families. Your case changed how I practice law. The system works when people demand proof instead of accepting institutional narratives, I said. That's what I do in my job, and that's what I taught my son. Freeman nodded. He's at the Manhattan DA's office now, right? I saw an article about him winning a major public corruption case. That's right, I said. He's already building a reputation for taking down powerful people who abuse their positions. He learned from experience. Dylan graduated from Yale Law School near the top of his class and accepted a position with the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in the Public Corruption Unit. His first major case involved prosecuting a school superintendent who'd embezzled millions from a district serving low-income students. He won. When reporters asked him about the case, he gave them a quote that reminded me of everything I'd tried to teach him. Corruption thrives when people believe that power protects them from accountability, but it doesn't. Evidence is stronger than influence. Truth is more powerful than political connections. And when you abuse your position to hurt vulnerable people, you will be held accountable. I have personal experience with that. I read that quote and smiled. He'd learned the lesson perfectly. Sometimes I think about that phone call at 2:18 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. The fear in Dylan's voice. The certainty that his future was over. The helplessness of facing a conspiracy designed by people he'd trusted. And I think about how close we came to losing everything. If I hadn't been a district attorney, if I hadn't known how to investigate corruption, if I hadn't had access to resources and connections, Dylan would have been just another student destroyed by a corrupt system. His academic record would show a theft accusation. His scholarship would have been lost. His future would have been permanently damaged. The people who framed him would have gotten away with it. But that didn't happen. Because evidence mattered. Because we refused to accept injustice. Because we fought back against institutional corruption even when it seemed impossible. And because I'd taught my son that truth and integrity are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. That's what prosecutors do. That's what fathers do. And sometimes, when you're very fortunate, those two responsibilities align at exactly the moment they're needed most. The case taught me something I carried into every prosecution afterward. The most dangerous corruption isn't the obvious crime. It's the sophisticated abuse of power by people who believe their position makes them untouchable, who target the vulnerable knowing victims lack resources to fight back. That corruption requires more than legal action. It requires public exposure, aggressive prosecution, and consequences severe enough to deter future abusers. Councilman Thatcher served his full sentence. When released, he was unemployable, disgraced, and banned from holding public office. Mrs. Pemberton served 2 years and lost everything she'd built in education. Justin Thatcher completed probation, but carried a criminal record that followed him into adulthood. Their lives were ruined because they'd tried to ruin my son's life. And Dylan? He became the prosecutor who protected students from the exact corruption he'd survived. That was justice. That was redemption. And that was proof that sometimes the system works exactly as it should. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.